This is Radio TV Phono Nut, and I promised you another repair video. Well, here it is. This is a General Electric Model 15 78 RPM record player from about 1947, I believe. This uses a 3-tube amp, 35Z5, 50L6, and 12SQ7, and a 5-inch speaker here on the front. We have a off-on volume control and a 3-position tone control, so it should be a decent performing unit. Now the main reason I'm doing this, because I know some of you are saying he's doing another record player, the main reason I'm doing this is to illustrate something that's often seen on eBay. Many times you'll see something this old, maybe not this old, or maybe older, and the seller will claim that it works 100%, or they'll just say it works. Well, I'm here to tell you that something this old is not going to just work. If it does work, it's not going to work at peak performance, and it's probably not going to last long. Well, the seller of this record player said it worked, and that whenever they played a 33 1/3 RPM album on it, it sounded like it was running at 45 RPM. So obviously they didn't know that this is a 78 RPM phonograph, but they said it worked. Now I've already peeked under here, and there's no way this thing can work because the motor mounting grommets have deteriorated. In fact, this turntable platter, I can tell, is not even making contact with the rubber drive wheel. Now it's quite possible the motor mounts could have been intact enough to rotate the platter before it was sent off, and all the banging around in shipment caused them to crumble the rest of the way. I don't know. But we're going to plug this up and see what it does. And if it blows up, I don't really care. It ain't like I hadn't replaced charred parts before. Yeah, I can hear the motor turning, but as you can tell, no platter rotation. We have bad filter capacitor hum. No surprise. Turn it all the way up. And would you believe this cartridge actually still has some output? Yes, it's one of the old flat crystal cartridges. I'm sure the needle's gone, shot. Yeah, this is going to need an overhaul. So that's what I mean by take the phrase "it works" with a grain of salt, unless it's being sold by somebody like me, or Chris Cuff, or Jordan Peer, or anybody else that specializes in vintage electronics restorations and specializes in doing it correctly, not some botched job. And of course, when somebody like us does it, the price has got to be higher. Something like this, it was $9.99, and I was the only bidder. You know, you can't expect much from it. In fact, I imagine the last time this thing saw a service technician's soldering iron was in 1953, when this repair tag was dated. It doesn't say on here what was done to it, but it's dated December the 11th, 1953. And I guess the first thing we can do is get the amp working properly. And if this cartridge turns out to have full output, I'm probably just going to leave it in there, because it's just so rare to find one of these types of players that still has a functioning crystal cartridge in it. In fact, I think I did a couple of YouTube videos in the past where I run across a couple of these old players that still had functioning cartridges in them, so we'll just leave the one in this one alone for now. Here's the amp, the 3 tubes that I mentioned, and the filter capacitor that needs to be replaced. And the floppy motor, see, it's all flippy and floppy, all because the grommets are rotten. And these motor feed wires are going to have to be fixed because they're all brittle and crumbling in places. And I can tell this was made before GE really started cheapening out, because they used quick disconnect terminals on the speaker. Had this been something from the 50s or 60s or later, they'd have just had the wires soldered directly to the speakers. I'll give you another tip. Most of these old players have this type of old, I don't know what this handle's made out of, but whatever they're made out of, they're always dry rotted by now. Can't tell you how many of these I picked up and the handle would just shred on me and crumble. So if you get one of these kind of players, don't pick it up by the handle, or either replace the handle, one of the two. Otherwise you might have a little nasty accident. Here's our motor. It just fell completely out, and as you can see, it has one heck of a dent in the idler wheel, so that'll have to be rebuilt. It's not uncommon on these 78 RPM players, because they have no means of retracting the idler wheel when the player's turned off. And when this got turned off in the early 50s, more than likely in the early 50s, and sat unused until 2018, then that's how dents like that happen. I just went ahead and cut the motor loose. I'm going to set it to the side since it's got to be rewired anyway, and we'll concentrate on our amplifier. Here's the amplifier all removed, and I can tell you this is not going to be an easy one to work on because of this volume control bracket here in the way. It gets in the way of the filter capacitor. Looks like all these resistors are surplus parts from the war. I'll bring your attention to this nice asbestos pad here that was placed here to reduce the heat from the tubes from possibly affecting the cabinet and all that. And a lot of people freak out over those asbestos pads, and yes, I agree that there's concern there, but as long as you don't go messing with it, I don't think it's going to pose a problem to you. When you're working on something like that, just handle it as the least amount you have to, and don't disturb it. As far as this eBay stuff I've been doing here lately, I'll go ahead and tell you I am getting a little burned out on it. It's because of all the fees they charge, and it just seems like they can't get their account straight. Seems like I just paid them a boatload of money in fees and shipping charges, and then I checked it today, and now they're wanting more money out of me. So, you know, that's about the way it goes. I go to the work of finding all this stuff and fixing it up and selling it and all that good stuff, and they get all my money. So, you know, there's really just not much point in me fooling with it if I'm going to be giving most of my money to eBay and FedEx. But the alternative is I can list the stuff on the local Facebook, baby clothes, and cell phone pages, and have people either expect to get the stuff for $5, or they'll tell you they want it, and they'll be by at a certain time, and you never hear a word out of them. And I hate to say it, but even some of the vintage electronics groups on Facebook are not much better. As far as people wanting something for nothing, you'd think fellow collectors would realize the time and expense involved in getting some of this old stuff working, and it's worth more than $5. Okay, I removed a couple of connections from this control bracket here where I could move it aside to get to the filter capacitor, and you can see how it's soldered in there. Now I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to do as far as mounting replacements. I'd like to go with my normal terminal strip method and get rid of this can, but I got to find a place to mount everything since this is such a unconventional amp design. And this is classic GE, just make something packed up to make it more difficult to work on. And it only got worse as the years went by. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to mount our terminal strip right here to where it won't be in the way of anything that I anticipate having to work on. This lead here is coming off of the cathode of our rectifier. This is our 1500 ohm dropping resistor. Our second lead here goes down to the screen grid of the audio output tube, and also connected to the screen grid is another dropping resistor for the plate of the 12SQ7 tube. And it was nice of them to make those connections at the tube socket, as well as the audio output transformer feed here at the rectifier tube socket, so we won't have to fool with connecting those things here. You know, the less number of wires I have to disconnect and reconnect, the better I like it. And we'll just, once we solder this terminal strip to the chassis, we'll solder our filter capacitors to the terminal strip, and we'll run a ground wire from here to our appropriate spot in the circuit. Now, the reason I have this jumper like this is so I can connect the ground from one filter capacitor here and the ground from the other filter capacitor here, and not have to do all this tacky looking movement to try to stretch leads to make everything stretch over. It looks so much better doing it the way I'm going to do it. Okay, we're getting there. Testing the first section of the filter capacitor, 6.1 microfarads. I didn't even look at the value printed on it, but should be at least 47. I went with a 68 for a replacement, and then a 33 for the second filter capacitor, and a 33 for the audio output tube cathode bypass. It's not critical, you know, just as long as it's at least the amount of what was originally in there, and as long as you don't get too carried away, it'll work just fine. And here's section number 2, 6.5 microfarads. So yeah, that one's much better. Yeah, right. And the audio output tube cathode bypass is 6. So yeah, that capacitor is pretty pathetic. Now this is what we did. We mounted a terminal strip here on the chassis here, and we just simply mounted our capacitors on the terminal strip. Shortened the original wires to where it wouldn't be a bunched up mess back there. This capacitor here originally was mounted over here, one end of the capacitor connected to chassis, the other end connected to circuit ground here. Well, thankfully with modern components and such, we can move things around and neaten things up and make it easier for us. This is our circuit ground. This is our lug tied to chassis, so that capacitor will work just fine right there. Here's our audio output tube cathode, 150 ohm resistor, going from the cathode to circuit ground, and our electrolytic capacitor in parallel with the resistor, and this will be our ground lead, which I'll shorten to the appropriate length and connect it right here. Now we're leaving this original filter can in place, mainly because I don't like holes in a chassis where something used to be, and the can of this filter capacitor provides our ground bus. If I took that out, I'd really have to make things look sloppy to connect everything together, and I just assume not do that, so it can just stay there for appearance purposes. Okay, that phase of the chassis restoration is complete. Yeah, this lead here connects to our power switch on the volume control, and this resistor connects to the center of the volume control. And that resistor is way off value, so it's going to get replaced, and all of these others are going to get checked, and if any of them are out of tolerance, which some of them I know are, they're getting replaced because I've already checked them. Here's a paper waxy down in here that needs to go, but I don't see any other waxies, so that may be the only one in there. That looks like the coupling capacitor between the plate of the first audio tube and the control grid of the output tube. Okay, here we are with the amp reassembled and ready to put it back in the cabinet. Hopefully it'll work okay, but this was a bit of a hornet's nest to work on. It wasn't really laid out properly, but like I've said, that's typical GE. They never were, especially in post-World War II years, they never were too good at making chassis that were convenient to work on. Okay, we're now ready to run the smoke test on the amplifier. Let it warm up. Well, that sounds nice. Okay, so now all we got to do is fix the drive mechanism, and we ought to be able to play a record. And I can tell you this needle shot, it's just a stub of where a needle used to be, so I'll have to order a 3mm stylus or needle for this. This is a type of cartridge. You can either use the Victrola style needles that you have to change after every play, or you can install a osmium or sapphire stylus in the cartridge and get more plays out of it. And in case I haven't already mentioned it, this is a General Industries mechanism, and before I start on the motor, I want to remove this little clip and pull the spindle out and clean it and re-lubricate it. I can tell it's all dried out and not turning very smoothly. Okay, that turns nice and smoothly now. Now we'll pull the platter off and clean the inner rim with alcohol and take the motor apart, clean it and oil it and put some new mounting grommets on it, and we ought to be able to play a record. Okay, obviously we need a new idler wheel, and I need to put some more correct type motor mounts on it, but it's rotating.
Doggy in the window, I do hope that doggy's for sale.
And we need a needle that's not a busted off nub.
Is that doggy in the window? I do hope that doggy.
Yeah, I found an old Victrola needle. It's probably not in the best of shape, but it's better than what came out of it.
And leave my poor daddy alone.
Okay, there you go. Obviously a few more things that need to be addressed, but pretty much self-explanatory. But this thing's well on its way to being a fully functioning 78 RPM record player.
Except the bees, the other puppies run here and there over the hill.